Welcome to my channel, Average Indian Joe, and thank you for watching my series, The Resilient Voices. Our today's guest is Dr. Rajesh Save, a Mumbai based professional with 3 decades of leading HR divisions for multiple organizations. Currently, co founder of Impaker Consulting, an AI based organization helping many organizations, is a avid mountaineer and he's also a thought leader. So please enjoy today's discussion and continue watching my channel. Thank you. Dr. Save, thank you for coming here.
Okay.
And it's a privilege. It's like we're meeting after almost like a decade.
Yeah, almost.
And I have always been very impressed with your ability to express and also involve people in conversation. And probably one of that attribute I was so impressed with that I started thinking about my second half of life. So I became 50. I said, okay, let's do podcasting. And I really genuinely wanted to have you as my guest in the first season that I did last year. But for some reason, it wasn't working. So I thought, okay, I need to reach out to you and then invite you. But thank you for coming in.
Oh, no. Thank you so much, and pleasure is mine. I still fondly remember and relish those memories of our meetings in LA whenever I used to visit.
Yeah.
I mean,
A
yeah,
lot of places we
quite a few times we met, and I think some of those visits are always there, like imprinted on my mind. So I keep on.
Yeah, that's a beauty of meeting people, many people, and then you just remember by face and by their personality as well as to how what you can take the best out of them, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, relating names to faces is a competency that every HR professional should develop. But yeah, I don't know whether innate or developed, but yeah, over a period of time, you kind of.
You wear so many hats, right? As a consultant, as a thought leader, as a teacher, entrepreneur, and researcher, right? So many hats. But when I look at you as a personality, how do you define your personality when you are gone through these different roles?
I don't know. Shall I quote a Marathi poem here with it?
Yeah, definitely. मराठीत पण बोलू शकतो.
So one of my favorite poets,
हां.
Suresh Bhatt. There's a very nice poem. I'll just kind of quote a couple of lines from that. He says, "गुंतुनी गुंत्यात साऱ्या पाय माझा मोकळा रंगुनी रंगात साऱ्या रंग माझा वेगळा." It's a beautiful poem, but I was impressed with these two lines for last several years. I think first time I heard this when I was in school. I didn't exactly understand the meaning out of what exactly he's trying to say. Suresh Bhatt is known for a little complicated meanings, and of course poetry is a media where you can kind of read the perception, right? I mean, it's so now that I realize when I look back and try and kind of decipher what exactly Suresh Bhatt would have said. And that's the answer to your question actually, because yeah, I mean, I wear so many hats, and sometimes few of the hats together, sometimes the hats are separate, but it happens naturally over a period of time, and it has to, right? I mean, you can't decide that, okay, fine, I'm going to wear. But the only difference is, as a part of my current routine, I would say,
Mhm.
I keep on interacting with several generational diversities. When I teach, for instance, and I teach MBA in NM, at that point in time, you're meeting all Gen Zs. So you need to interact with them in a very different way. I mean, people can say whatever they want to say about Gen Zs and millennials and stuff like that. There's a lot to learn from everyone. When I interact with my customers, they are either a baby boomers or sometimes Gen Z also, Gen Z as well, or Gen X, whatever it's called. I don't remember that. Gen X, yeah. So they are pretty different because they come from a very different perspective. So you need to keep on shifting gears and changing the way you are interacting with these guys. And that's fun. That's fun because...
But then that came as your personality right from the childhood, or you developed it to mold yourself into different roles.
No, I think that's my personality. It is If you go back to again Sigmund Freud's theory of formative years, then his first 5 years, I stayed with my auntie. It was my mother was a working woman. My auntie as in my maushi, my mom's elder sister. And there were several people at that particular place over there. And then you are not staying with your parents, you're staying with someone else, right? So you need to be little, I wouldn't use the word careful, but I think that got ingrained. So over a period of time, then later, of course, I came to, with my mom and stuff when I grew up. And after that, I think I've been like that, just to understand how the situation is and then try and mold yourself to suit that situation. That's a self-monitoring and flexibility is all about.
You're a co-founder of Impecker Consulting, right? And the whole idea of this company is looking at AI in a different way, data-driven intelligence that you bring to the table, right? Why did you choose this particular space after coming out of your HR leadership role? Is it something you were envisioning right from the beginning, or you saw the opportunity to jump into this particular area? Because what you're doing is very interesting. I've gone through some of the use cases that you posted on LinkedIn. Right?
I think a mix of both.
Hmm.
So, okay, let me go back a little bit. When I started my career, at least 5 years into the career, 3 years into the career, I was very clear that at 40, I need to head HR. At 45, I need to be a global head of HR, which means that your realm of, responsibility should be global. And at 50, I should retire and do something different. Now, what is that different? Definitely, I wasn't aware of it. 40, I hit the goal. At exactly the age, at 40, I became HR head for the first time. 45, I have hit the goal as well. In fact, 4 days before my 40th birthday, 45th birthday, I was the global head of HR. So that hit pretty well. So retiring was a little bit, postponed because of some health issues and stuff like that, right? So I retired at 2 years later than what actually I should have had. That time, Manish, if you recall, data science is a burgeoning field, right? I mean, from 2007 onwards. 2007, I specifically take this year into consideration because that year cloud came in, that year Twitter came in.
Correct.
That year Orkut was also there. Orkut disappeared over a period of time. Plus Moore's law, right? The computing power of actually transistors per square inch and all that kind of stuff, right? Gibson kind of doubling up every year and things like that. So everything was being kind of conducive for the data explosion. When I used to visit US and I used to meet you and many others, I realized that data science is really coming up very fast. And then machine learning is something which I had learned way back when I did my PhD. But that time I didn't know that it will ever grow so fast. Then I started wondering, what am I doing? Okay, if there is something else that I want to do, what could be the option available? First, definitely was teaching, 100%. Manish, I started my career earning money, as if that is a career that we're talking about, as a teacher. Okay, way back in 1989, I started teaching in Somaiya College of Arts and Commerce, whatever. I studied psychology there. So teacher was always there with me. So one option was very clear that I'm going to be a teacher for sure. Only thing is now, of course, what am I going to teach was a little different. Coming from HR, immediately what I got on my platter is, why didn't you come and teach OB, organizational behavior and leadership and whatever. And fortunately at NM, I had a reasonably good rapport with people over there and they knew what I was doing. So I got that immediately. Okay. Then I said, machine learning, I've learned so much. So why can't I do more about it? I have a friend, rather, he's the head of the Department of Psychology in Mumbai University, Vivek Belikar. He's a data scientist. He's also a PhD in psychology. So both of us kind of started discussing, what all we can do. And then he's like fresh, he knows everything pretty well because he's from the contemporary development. So I started revising everything. And I said, okay, now let's get into the data. Luckily, well, I shouldn't say luckily. Incidentally, COVID happened. And that was a great opportunity for me because now the world had halted. And then I had enough free time to hone my skills. Though I knew machine learning, I didn't know coding. So I said, no, take this opportunity. Manish, the best way to learn is to teach. Because the kind of preparation that you do for teaching, that gives you opportunity. Again, ever since then, even till today, I keep on revising my syllabus by at least 20%. 20% syllabus is changed every year. That's my way of learning.
So for that, you need to learn first.
Exactly. So that's the way that I'm kind of honing my skills, developing myself, and then you're forcing yourself up against the syllabus that you have changed it. Now jolly well learn it and teach.
So your company at this point of time doing a lot of interesting things.
Yeah.
Right. What's your objective, right? Because obviously you have done PhD in psychometrics, right? You learned statistical machine learning at that particular time, which is theoretical probably, right? And then you started looking at the different patterns right now. But your company right now, a couple of use cases that I've seen, especially into the sports segment.
Sports, that's a recent one.
So that is something very interesting.
So the one which you are referring to was conducted by CSR, the Confederation of Sports and Recreation, which is basically a kind of outfit of SAI, Sports Authority of India. They have two goals. One is the Commonwealth Games, which are coming up in 2030. And the second is the possible Olympics, if at all India going for, which is 2036. So they have started working on that. Now the first thing what they are doing is they are focusing on certain games where we have more or better chances of getting medals. So it's basically about focusing on certain games, and that is where they'll require a lot of data help. So what we have started currently working on is that part of the. So I'll be working with CSR, which is Confederation of Sports and Recreation, which is again a semi-government of India outfit, and it's going to be very exciting because the data we have, but we have not kept it properly. Okay, and whenever I see data, I get excited. But before that, Manish, the one more point, you were talking about Impeccor as a consulting thing. Let me tell you one more thing. So who are the guys who work in Impeccor? First of all, most of those guys are my students. The first batch that I would have taught in, say, 2020 and then 21 and 22. If you ask me personally, when I started in Impeccor, it was only teaching, training and consulting. The execution has been infused by my students. So every time they would say that, sir, why don't we do, this is a great opportunity. Why can't we do that? Now, my biggest teachers are now my students.
Okay.
Because whatever latest is happening, and that the world is exploding.
Yeah.
It is humanly impossible for you to keep tab of everything. What happened yesterday, for example, you wouldn't know that. But this community or these so-called millennials and Gen Z are so upon with that. So every time I kind of place a problem, with them, and they said, okay, fine, we can do 1, 2, 3 things. And I mean, for instance, let me tell you, we have created one very exciting. So again, coming back to data, okay, just one instance how exactly we kind of develop products, and not products actually, services, but they can be called products as well. So there's a company. I happen to know someone over there. It's a big company, 25,000 people, Indian pharmaceutical company. He said, I want to do a lot of things, but my data is not clean. And that's exactly, it's true for all Indian companies. Our data has a lot of noise and moisture. Is there anything that you can do? Now, for me, data cleaning would be maybe we can run some algorithms and stuff like that, right? Just to kind of, we teach, imputing, mean imputing and a median imputing, they're all jargons. So I placed this problem in front of, my students who are my associates now. They said, "Arey sir, we can use GenAI and let's do it." I said, "What?" So immediately I learned so many things at that point in time. Within the next 5 to 10 minutes, is that we can use GenAI. We can actually, use OCR to. So obviously all the data which is there. See, very simple example: date of birth. Now, date of birth might have been entered wrong. But at that point in time, if it is entered wrong, or your Aadhaar card number for that matter, it remains wrong forever.
I see.
So if you have to clean that data, you need to go back to the scanned document, which is an Aadhaar card, and correct it. Which means that you can use OCR there. Then you can convert that into a JSON file. Okay, and then convert that into CSV and upload it. Now this entire chain, okay, I mean, you will know about it, right? We have to basically either use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. So we said, okay, fine, let's do one thing. And that's how I do my business at this point in time, Manish. We create POC. I said, immediately, let's create a POC. I contacted the same client again. I said, send me those guys who have left, because confidentiality is an issue, right? So send me some 3-4 files of people who have left your company and I'll show you a POC. If you like the POC, give me your business. And they said, this is perfectly fine.
Proof is in the pudding.
Absolutely. So once we show that, and we created a dashboard with a lot of indices on the dashboard. How much data is cleaned, how much need to be cleaned, what are the fields where people consistently commit mistakes, and so on and so forth, right? So we got the business. Currently, we're executing it.
So, biggest aspect of your journey, 3 decades of HR leadership, right? The HR people part, right, which is a very, very core part of HR leadership, but also training and people development, right, is also a bigger aspect of it, right? So when you look at both the aspects at this point of time, the whole teaching part, do we need to change at this point of time, not just in the corporate level, but also in management colleges or you're teaching at the management college, but you must have taught when you say Somaiya also, you taught in Somaiya, right? So should we take a pause here and then try to change this teaching style or teaching material itself, the curriculum itself, with AI being the focus? Do you think it's needed?
Of course, yes. But how? That's a big question. Obviously, way back in 1918, and I started teaching so many things were very, very different. Extremely. First of all, I was teaching industrial psychology. Now, that subject is also kind of considered to be on the periphery of psych. The moment you think of psychology, you think of clinical psychology. Generally, perception. Industrial is on the periphery. Okay, so I was teaching industrial psychology at that point in time, and that to commerce students. So, Manish, the problem is, just imagine a guy who is doing a chartered accountancy, doing his articleship. Is he or she really interested in knowing what industrial psychology is all about? So, the challenge was to make your subject interesting so that you can kind of be like a magnet and pull them, get them on. They would sit there because attendance is compulsory, but is the mind there? So, the challenge is basically to make the subject interesting. Today, things have changed a lot conceptually. Now, so I'll give you another example. There was this course called MBA in Decision Science and Analytics, which actually got discontinued, but that was basically offered by NMIMS and Purdue. So 1 year at NM, 1 year at Purdue. And Purdue was very, very careful in terms of even selection of students, faculty, and everything. So I used to teach people analytics for them. First day, I mean, you're a CHRO, right? And you go there with that aura of CHRO. A little bit of an arrogance, overconfidence, always there. For any sake, so for that matter, you can't, however you say, you can't be that humble, right? Because your chair influences you a lot.
Yeah.
So I went and told them that, look here, let's do expectation analysis. What are you expecting out of me? The students were a little taken aback. Again, now these are all Gen Z kind of guys. When I insisted, one of them said, sir, teach us something that Google and YouTube can't. That time Gen A wasn't there.
Yeah.
So teach us something that Google and YouTube can't teach us. Now that's a pretty tricky one because all of us are Googling and all of us are YouTubing. Sometimes when you're under pressure, you can come up with a lot of such answers. If you would have created a simulation and asked me how would you answer this question, possibly I wouldn't have been able to answer. But at that point in time, extempore, I said, yes, definitely. My 28 years of career is neither on Google nor on YouTube, so don't worry. You have enough me to kind of discuss around. So the students are like that. What is in for me? What part of you will help me? That is something they're very, very clear. They know exactly where they're heading towards. The students that I taught many, many years ago, they were directionless. Because economy wasn't opened up. This is a pre-1991 era. So jobs were generally government and a few private sector jobs. Let's see whatever we get it. Now students are focused that I want to do this. So they know exactly what if whatever you are teaching is not of their interest. And NM, they're extremely careful about the students' feedback for the faculty. There are times, why NM, XLRI, IMs, all of them. If the faculty feedback is bad, where initially you are discontinued and eventually they may ask you to go Isura. So you have to be very careful. Number one, the students should appreciate what you are doing. And number two, you should teach them what is relevant. Skills and knowledge. These days, move from down to up, right? Move upwards. Wisdom comes from talk. The crux of your 30 years or 35 years of experience is all about wisdom. It's not about skills and knowledge. So the trade-off is, the deal is very clear that I will teach you wisdom and you teach me skills and knowledge.
Yes. That is so rightly said.
Because these guys are all, up, and there are many things that we generally syllabus-oriented things, they would already know.
Yeah, most of them. Even my niece, who's 10 years old, she started learning Python.
Yeah.
Right. It's a availability of the resources. In like 30 years back, resources to learn were very limited. Right. We couldn't Google, or we couldn't have, unless it's a textbook, or you have interest to go and look into things. Then only you will learn.
You know what is lagging today is the application, not the knowledge and skills. They know Python, as you've rightly said, right? They know, the entire context, but where to apply is something which comes from people like us who are experienced. Because, that application bent of mind is very important. I can give you a couple of examples. For instance, they know GenAI very well. Okay, the example that I gave about data cleaning. I mean, using OCR and stuff like that, it's, all the functionalities, but use that to clean the data. I'll give you another example, another customer of mine. Now, this is an absolutely killing stuff. That's why I said, we take projects only which are disruptors. For example, how do you use a supply chain solution where you use machine learning algorithms, okay, to help hospital to save the inventory cost? So the way I go about it. So what I do is, okay, fine. Imagine a hospital. For the sake of discussion, I give some figures, okay. So their annual cost of purchase is about 54 crores for the sake of discussion. By the way, this was a POC which was developed, so I can kind of, it didn't go further because of certain reasons. That's a different thing. So I give it to students, 54 crores supply chain. The 54 crores worth medicines are bought. Now, why I'm taking hospital? Because a supply chain of hospital is very, very tricky. There are medicines which have got, expiry dates. Okay. And they are varying expiry dates. Okay. So I start with students. Now, let's understand and address this. I just keep on facilitating. They'll keep on speaking, right? As the moment we start the entire stuff. So what kind of medicines are required? If it's a supply chain, you need to understand the cycle. Okay, let's go ahead with cycle. Then students say, okay, fine, sir, we should understand the illnesses first, and because that is inviting the cycle, right? Yeah. So let's start with June. I'll give you an example. Hospital is in Mumbai. June, July, August. What happens? Lots of bird flu, viral. Okay, yes, so all the medicines which are required for airborne diseases and stuff like that. And this is exactly we kind of observed in some of the. So June, July, August was like, more to do with viral. September onwards, it becomes a little healthy. Okay. Incidentally, in a lighter vein, and you can check for yourself, at least in India for sure. September and October, more babies are born.
Okay, that's an interesting study.
Very interesting and intriguing. And I checked with someone, he said, Rajesh, what, December mein shaadiyan zyada hoti. So anyway, jokes apart, but that's the truth. Quite a few hospitals, you can check for yourself. India.
So your inventory management
related to those, correct. All the planned surgeries like hip replacement, knee, these are all planned surgeries. These surgeries happen in the month of November and December and January, because those are supposed to be healthy months. The point that I want to drive here is very simple. The students are learning, they're discussing, they are coming up with points, and then saying, wow, yeah, this is what is happening. So we understand the entire stuff, and then we start with machine learning. Now let's apply machine learning here. We understand the trend, right? We understood the pattern. Now, what is your dependent variable here? Obviously, cost. You have to save that. Right. which medicines are contributing to that. Cost is a continuous variable. So you have to use regression. You can't use classification. So the way I teach is like this. My advantage is I get my future employees from these kids. Okay, so as they go further, they start working, and then we have a lot of free time. Is there anything that we can do for you?
Well, that's the best time to
Exactly.
fail fast. Like you learn. If you don't like it, choose a different path.
Perfect. So the point here is, Manish, I think it is about the way you teach. You need to change it radically. Otherwise, generally what one would do is take a PowerPoint, one by one slides. Basically, I call it death by PPT. I mean, that is not done now. You need to have eventually. I mean, why do you need PowerPoint in the era of Gen AI? A student can find out whatever they want to find out from either a chat GPT or a copilot or whatever that you have. But the application is not there on chat GPT.
Most I have seen this. Okay, in one of my friend's son, sophomore in college, already built his company in AI in a very specialized manner to help students to track their day-to-day life, right? And I was so amazed because, and it's not just him. There are a lot of kids who want to do the startups, and I'm sure that's the same culture here. India has maximum entrepreneurs in the world at this point of time. Entrepreneurship, right? When you look at because 3 decades of HR leadership and seeing people doing your psychology major, right, and the psychometric as a PhD. Do you think the inclination to start the new own companies or pursue their own life differently, is it coming because the insecurity of jobs, or is it coming because they are genuinely inspired to explore more things? How do you see this?
Oh, very complicated. So, Manish, let me go back to some socio-economical perspective first, and then I'll come over there.
Okay.
Our parents, okay, basically must have been, again, this is a pre-1991 era. So, consumerism wasn't there. They would have done whatever little bit that they would have done. Most of them worked with government organization. Couldn't make too much of money or whatever. Okay. Our generation, I call it EMI generation.
What is it, EMI?
EMI that you...
Oh, EMI. Okay.
And why I call it EMI generation is because we went on... now, our growing up coincided with post-1991, decontrolled India. And we went on buying spree, right? We bought flats, one after the other. In fact, I'm sure my generation, people would have 3, 4 flats. What we have done for our kids is that we have make their future secure so far as basic needs are concerned. Now, these kids do not have that responsibility of, getting into creation of wealth, because most of these guys, their fathers and mothers have created a lot of stuff. We went through that rigmarole. They don't have to. So they can afford to take little more chances. So the way they have been... Second thing, the way we read our generation is that we will give everything to our kid which we didn't get. There's a positive and negative.
That is parenting, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is parenting for today. I don't think that parenting was there in our previous generations. Okay, now that's a parenting. Now that's positive and negative both. That was possibly would made some kids indisciplined and whatever. But the good side of the story is that these guys they have no tension. Okay, they can think with open mind. They don't have constraints. Creativity stifles under constraints. Okay. Okay. I mean, there's another way of looking at it. Looking at that as well. There's a theory of constraint, right? Which is Elio Goldratt.
No, I don't know.
Elio Goldratt, very famous. Now, he says that if you are more constrained, you become more creative. But that's a professional constraint I'm talking about. These constraints, which I just referred to, is this family-based constraint, right? That you don't even have a place to stay, for example, or you have to build a house and all that kind of stuff. So, those tensions are not there. They are faced with the constraints which are there in the business. So, obviously, the way they face...
Think differently, that means.
Exactly. So they can actually use their exploratory mind to come up with several things. They will go for, I will think of 10 different reasons of why I cannot do this.
That's exactly.
They will think for 10 different reasons of why, how can I do this?
So with that, right? And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and a lot of those fear, right? That okay, AGI will come in next few years. Some people say that in 10 years, 5 years, 2 years. Elon Musk says 1 year. Do you think this generation will actually struggle with this fast pace, AGI and AI, progress, or will they actually use it for their benefit and thrive from there? How
Well,
do you see this?
Yeah. There's something very unfortunate will happen because there's some, part of our generation, this coming generation that I'm looking at is, they're way behind. They are unaware of most of the stuff which is going to be happening. In fact, even HR students, I keep on telling them even today that, guys, your jobs, you have a 30 years of runway ahead of you. Your jobs are at risk if this is what you're going to do. And it is mandatory for you to get into the other side of, so go and develop AI solutions rather than get victims. It's
So learn. Even asking,
a tiger is in front of you. Are you going to, the choice is yours. Either you go and ride the tiger or you going to fall prey to the tiger. It's all or none. There's nothing in between now. And 5 years, 10 years, I'm not sure. I'm not a forecaster. Like, who's that guy? The Google very famous, I forget his name.
Eric? Eric?
No, not Eric. His name is, the guy who has written a book called Singularity.
Okay, I don't know.
Anyway, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
That guy is supposed to be one of the... Anyway, the point is, Ray Kurzweil.
Okay.
Ray Kurzweil. So the point is, you've got to be very, very conscious about it. And there are people who are consciously considering that, okay, fine, we're going, I don't think AI will disrupt that much. They have no future ahead of it. But the guys who are actually riding, and I see in students, there's definitely a complete divide between the two populations.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for sure. One more thing.
Yeah.
Some of our basic, for example, BCom as a degree, or a BBA, or a BMA, all the educational mafias have created this tri-letter words. I don't know the applicability of all this.
See, that's why I'm so worried about. So even for me as a parent, it's very difficult to advise my kid as to where he should move.
Hold it. So I'll tell you what I told my son. Very simple. I didn't tell my son as such in those many words, but definitely I wanted him to choose a career which might be a, okay, let me be a little mathematical, BCG kind of stuff. So you have a x-axis and a y-axis, okay, supply and demand.
Okay.
So there are jobs which are high supply, high demand, which everyone knows, AI, whatever, ML, data, whatever we talk about. High supply, high demand. There are low supply, low demand jobs. There are high supply, low demand and low supply, high demand jobs. People tend to think of only those high supply, high demand. The wisdom lies in picking up a job which is low supply but tomorrow's high demand.
Right.
So you have to plot it across a time T.
Okay.
And pick
That's
up
very interesting.
and pick up something which is it's a challenging thing, right? So my son and daughter, both of them, she's into sustainability and things like that, which is going to be a future.
Yeah, because you told me that, and I was like, both of them are trying at PhD, right? Both of them are doing.
Son possibly would do that. So he's into climate change and things.
Environment science.
Yeah, atmospheric sciences is it called? He's done his masters in that. But more to do with something which may not have demand today, or will have a low demand today, but tomorrow is going to be a great demand, and also be conscious of the fact that to what extent AI can disrupt it.
So your kids basically chose these lines based on influence from your side, your thinking process, or they actually started seeing things differently at the early.
I think both my wife and I.
Okay.
Because my wife is another great success story because she did 22 years of banking. Then one fine morning she said, my passion was to do things in science, but for whatever reason, again, same thing, we come from the same generation. So job bank mein mil gaya, chalu ho gaya. So she quit bank and she joined, MSc. She did her master's in life sciences. And now she is about to complete her PhD in life sciences in IIT Mumbai.
Wow.
IIT Bombay, they would like to call Mumbai. IIT Bombay with, and her subject is wound healing in diabetes and things like that. So I think, maybe the ambience at home must have been
Ambience at home.
like that. So we didn't force, but maybe the kids were kind of rare like that.
You're a bit mountaineer, explorer, right? That part of your life has always been right from your childhood, or did you find something during the course of life?
No, I have been a sports person as a student.
Okay.
Okay, so I've represented districts and all. I used to play Kho-Kho at that point in time. This is like way back. Sports has been a part of my repertoire for several years. Because of jobs and several other things, I couldn't pursue certain things. Later, I picked up cycling. So when we used to meet, the entire central time, has to do. So a lot of cycling. And some heavy duty cycling, which means that 60 kilometers at one stretch and things like that.
Wow.
Without stopping. Then I had some health issues, okay, and you've got to be fit, okay, obviously because of some of the heart-related ailments. So you need to keep your cholesterol down. You need to be either running or doing something. So at that point in time, I said that, let me do something different now. Mountaineering was one option open because a good friend of mine has his own organization and they keep on kind of. So my son and daughter have been going for that for quite some time. Okay, as kids, they've been doing it. I decided to take a plunge at it when I left corporate, because then you have enough time for yourself. Because mountaineering is not about one fine morning you go and climb. You go to train yourself well.
Yes.
To train yourself, you need some free time for yourself. So then I said, okay, fine, let's start with that. So one thing is obviously climbing. Apart from climbing, there are a lot of other things that you need to do. Okay, because if you have to kind of disintegrate into small things, you need to have your quads, your hamstrings, your knees need to be strong. You carry about 12 kg, so obviously your shoulders need to be strong. So that's how I started training myself. But apart from that, yes, climbing. So for instance, I stay in my building has about 32 floors, right? So I do that 5 or 6 times under an hour.
Oh, the whole.
So about 150 to 200 floors. 200 floors under an hour.
Wow. Pretty much every day or
Twice a week.
twice a week?
Now I'm planning for my next trek comes in possibly in October.
There are two types, right? One is trekking is different than mountain climbing, because I'm not aware of, and I was just reading it earlier. But trekking takes pushing through physical and mental limits, right? Because it's a long journey. It's like a marathon, right? It's not a short sprint. It's a marathon, like Kilimanjaro, right? That it must have been a life-changing journey for you, right? For those 10 to 12 days?
Yeah, but 12 days.
12 days. Would you like to give us a little bit idea?
Yeah, but before that, let me tell you about, say, Everest Base Camp, for instance. Everest Base Camp has become now a plain vanilla stuff. So first, initially I did few treks, smaller treks, and then of course EBC. EBC was a good test of, how exactly you can go. But the advantage of that kind of trekking, Manish, is, first of all, EBC has become very easy now. Because right till Gorakshep, which is the last, close to the base camp, you have tea houses. So, you have a proper place to stay. Personal hygiene, everything is taken care of. Food and everything. So EBC would be a good precursor, but definitely in Kilimanjaro and maybe a lot of other treks are not like that. Because you don't have a single tea shop or
A place to even stay.
Sorry?
To a place to rest also.
Nothing.
So entire 20,000 feet of Kilimanjaro is you won't get any
Nothing. You've got to carry
your own stuff. Tent and
everything. Obviously, you have porters with you. They carry a lot of stuff. But a lot of other personal things which are pushed. For example, toilets. Very important. People don't talk about it. But if you go to EBC or maybe Annapurna base camp and all, they're proper, toilets which just like almost close to what we use generally over here. Over there are makeshift toilets.
Oh.
So, I mean, there's nothing, there's playing ground, you kind of set up everything, kitchen, everything is set up. Now that's, you're challenging your own, comforts.
Come out of comfort zone.
Exactly. 12 days of Kilimanjaro, maybe another 15 days. So a lot of other treks which is kind of people go for. If you're going for such kind of treks, then you're actually challenging your own comforts every now and
Makes you humble.
absolutely. Because then you know exactly that all those things are, pressure comforts are good for yourself, but this is something which really, even you have to get up in the night and go for, go to the washroom. You are wearing 3 layers and you are in a tent. From there you come out, it's pitch dark. Okay, you have to, of course, there's a lamp on the head and all. But in that you have to walk. It is, you have, you have to put forth efforts for that because you are maybe -3 degrees or whatever, walking in, and again the tents are pitched, so all the cords are, you might fall down as well. So the small things I'm talking about. Food, for example, you don't get everything that you want. There is standard stuff that you've got to eat. There is nothing more than that. So every now and then you've been challenged for all the comforts that you enjoy. I think that is very important. And Kili teaches you to be extremely humble. It's a single standing mountain.
Yeah.
Tallest single standing mountain. Wind speed is terrific. But there's something called pole pole.
What is it?
Slowly. That is the biggest lesson to life, that you cannot be on the fast by.
That teaches you a lot of life skill as well.
Exactly. Everything will be achieved. Eventually you're going to be there on the top. But then pole.
Again, discipline, right? You have to be disciplined.
Slow but steady.
Yeah. Slow but steady. Right?
Yeah. Continuously achieve everything, something every day. Why it is important for today's generation is, everything wants to be like this.
Instant gratification.
The fast food, everything the fast. I think
Dopamine, right?
Dopamine.
Yeah.
I think what matters more there,
Swipes.
in any of the mountaineering ventures, I take Kili's example because Kili is little weird. In fact, I told you there are 4 seasons that you cover in just 12 days.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Can you just tell us one more time here, please?
Yeah, so it happens is when you start Tanzania, right? It's an equator,
Tanzania.
an equator, almost like an equator. Kenya is an equator, Kenya and Tanzania next to each other. So when you start, it's about 35-40 degrees, sometimes 45 degrees.
Okay.
Also. At that time, you just need one dry fit,
Yeah.
t-shirt and maybe a short if possible, whatever. As you start walking, halfway through, and I'm going to narrate a couple of experiences also. Halfway through, you suddenly start, the rainforest.
Pouring.
It pours like crazy. Everything becomes wet. Your shoes, your socks, and all clothes that you're wearing. Of course, there are proper gears. Even by sleeping, because again, you're going to pitching a tent on a wetland.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a tough thing to do. Then comes the autumn. Okay. And suddenly all the trees they disappear. And the autumn is, again, it's getting very dry and chilly and things like that. And finally winter, a harsh winter, which is like -5, -10, where you have to climb almost like what? So we started about 10, 11 in the night and we reached at about 7. So through the night, you are walking through the ice. Okay. So that phase is very important because you keep on taking turns left, right, straight and all, and where the hell this stop is going to come? You don't. In fact, I was telling you about, there's this movie called Is Raat Ki Subah Nahi. Nothing to do with the context of the movie, but the words are very important, that you feel walking that this night ever going to end or not.
So you have to push your limits.
Exactly.
100%. Otherwise,
But the, once you reach up, first of all, you're above the clouds.
Yeah.
You can see the entire cloud right in front of you.
20,000 feet, right?
Exactly. But Manish, the good fun is, I told you about rainforest, right? So the clouds that you see are actually, out there it's raining.
Rainy.
So the clouds are actually raining clouds. And when you come down, it's a sharp drop. So you actually come through that cloud which are actually
raining down.
Ah,
See, that's an unbelievable experience.
unbelievable experience. Unbelievable.
So you have plans to do more now?
Yeah, I'm going for Annapurna. We call it Annapurna Circuit. So, which is
Going very soon, or
yeah, I mean September sometime.
your kids want to go with you?
No,
When
no,
they-
no.
They're
It's
not into this.
busy, not yet.
Is there anything that we haven't discussed and where you feel like, uh, you being here would add value if you speak about it? Anything that you want?
Uh, you know what? I did a course in film appreciation in FTI
Okay.
Pune.
Okay.
At that point in time, this is like 1991 times.
Hmm.
It's a 6 weeks course, Manish.
Hmm.
It changed my entire perspective towards watching movies.
How so?
We actually saw the world cinema there. I would suggest even you should do it.
The
That-
course?
The course.
Oh, wow.
It's a 6 weeks course. Obviously, that point in time, they used to select.
I don't have 6 weeks right now, so
It's a choice that one makes.
Okay.
Even I didn't have that point in time, but it was passion. I used to run a film society, by the way,
okay.
called Magic Lantern, and Magic Lantern is the name of the autobiography of a very famous film director called Ingmar Bergman, one of the best ever.
Okay.
So that gave me exposure to the best cinema in the world ever produced. We saw, I think, how many of every day we would see two and a half because there were a lot of short movies that we saw. So for 6 weeks, every day 2 movies,
Okay.
and we have to have analysis and various other factors, application of music in movies, for example, editing, everything is taught in that. It's a kind of compressed course. So I think that's something which some point in time I wanted to do something in that direction. Definitely not about film acting and all. Please don't mistake me for that. I was more interested in a journalist for films. Okay. But that didn't happen, right? Over a period of time, life took different turns. But I think that is something which really changed my. Even today, when I see a movie, if I see a single shot taken Nolan movie, for example, I say, "Wow, what is?"
So you basically, your analytical mind start going towards the direction as to just to find out it's interesting facts about how the particular film has been recorded or something like that. You tend towards your analytical mind jumps on those movie immediately.
Yeah, see, it's not that alone. There are a lot of technical things also.
Okay.
For example, like Raj Kapoor famously said that the film is actually not made by camera. The film is actually made on editor's table and a screenplay. Now, if a screenplay is not good, a film will never take shape.
Yes.
What we all think is all about actors and maybe a cinematographer or all, but it starts at the screenplay level and then on the editor's table. Hrishikesh Mukherjee was a great editor, one of the best editors that our industry has ever seen. You see his movie, he would never waste even a single. At that point in time, stock had to buy very expensive stock. Today we have digital. At that point in time, film had to be bought. He would never waste even a small piece of stock. Stock meaning films, right? At that point in time, you see his movie, you realize, oh my God, what a great cutting he has done. So there's consistency and continuity is absolutely managed by the screenplay and the editor. Now, when I watch movie, and before that, when I used to watch movie, there's a huge difference. You look at the context, you look at emotions in the movies, and you look at and you feel good. And now I feel nice. Okay, it's a travel between an emotional goer to a cognitive goer, if I may say so. So now I watch movies. After that, I watch movies with a lot of. So I appreciate every aspect of the movie.
So, but you wanted to be movie critic also, right?
I wanted to be a movie critic.
Okay.
Even when I was in corporate, I said I'll go back and become a movie critic. But that's fine. As long as.
So different hats you wore, right?
And then 3 years I was in, Z.
Oh, you were part of Z television also.
Yeah. So that again gave you a lot of opportunities to interact with a lot of guys.
Sort of this. Yeah. I am just excited to see the future because it's like the next 25 years in my view, because I am 51, 52 years now. Next 25 years, I feel like the world is going to change drastically, more than what it has changed in last 25 years. Right? So in your journey for next 20 years, 25 years, let's say you want to see the world, how would you like to see the world changing?
I don't know, but I would, I started with Suresh Bhatt's couplet, right?
Huh?
Okay, I would like to end with another favorite author of mine called Jaishankar Prasad, one of the very famous Hindi literateurs. Uh, he says, इस पथ का उद्देश्य नहीं है शांत भवन में टिक रहना, किंतु पहुंचना उस मंजिल पर जिसके आगे राह नहीं. So you've got to reach, and someone who is happy man, yeah. Happy man is the one. Happy man is very chauvinistic, actually. Happy person. A happy person is the one who actually is eagerly looking for every tomorrow.
That is true. I get up every day with fresh minds.
Exactly. So tomorrow I'm going to do that. A day after I'm going to do that. If that is there, then the excitement, that energy, that energy comes from all your students. Because you see them, the more time you spend with them, Manish, the more energetic that you get, more fitter you become.
It's a youth effect, right?
Absolutely.
It's a ecosystem.
Rub off.
Yeah.
Huge rub off.
Yeah. That's why I like to hang around with my niece and nephews.
If you hang around with your vintage and you're elder than you, you look at past.
Yeah.
If you hang around with kids, you look at future.
That's so true. Right?
So I love to do that.
Thank you so much for being here today. I think we talked about everything, looks like, right? And that's why I asked you question, is there anything that we never talked about? And this is the reason why I wanted you to be in the studio, because I looked at the flow of our conversation, because the whole conversation kept happening because of we picked one thread after each. Right, but thank you so much, and wish you all the best in Empecker Consulting. And I know you're going to make an impact in a certain way, and your teaching side as well will really inspire young minds to think differently. That's why I said, you're one of the hat that you wear is mentor and thought leader.
Maybe.
Yeah, it is. So thank you for being here.
I played it.
Yeah, such a nice story.
Privilege is mine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.